Hello, and welcome back to another episode of More Than Milestones. I am very, very excited today to be joined with Jon Fogel, who is a parenting researcher working on his PhD in developmental psychology. He's a best-selling author, and he is the founder of the Parent Lab. Jon, thank you so much for being here. We're going to dig into a lot of really good topics all about parenting today, but tell us a little bit about you first.
Yeah, so I'm a dad of four. So I got four little tiny humans running around. I've been through the toddler stage 4 times. And so yeah, I talk about parenting on the internet. I mean, it's it's not glamorous, but it is what it is. And it's led me to do some amazing things and get into the research on these things and behavioral neuroscience and like you mentioned, developmental psychology.
Yeah.
And now I got a new children's book coming out, which is super exciting with my wife. She is the co-author and illustrator of the book. Although everywhere it says that I'm the author, she definitely helped with some of these rhymes. She definitely locked these in. But the book is all about tools. And so it's the idea is that you read it with your kid and you can go through these emotional regulation tools so that when you're in the middle of a meltdown, you have all these things that you can do with your kid that aren't screaming at them and locking them in a closet somewhere. So, yeah, it's that's not, now I'm adding children's book creator and author to the laundry list. But I mean, really, I'm a dad. That's what it comes down to.
That's amazing. And back to it's not glamorous. It might not be glamorous to talk about parenting on the internet, but I think it's so necessary and so important and also a game changer for our generation. But
yeah, I think so much of it is that we don't have a lot of good examples of what alternatives are, right? All of us grew up, and I'm not saying all of us had the same parenting. Obviously not. I had great parents in many ways. I don't think it's very easy to do and talk about the things that I talk about if I didn't have parents who allowed for me to disagree with them and allowed for me to, have different opinions and things. I think my parents did a pretty good job, but I think basically everybody had some version of, punishments, rewards as the kind of guiding behavioral modification tools. And then what are we supposed to do except for what was done to us, or to totally reject that and just be in the dark? And so I do think it's necessary. I do kind of hate that I talk about parenting on the internet sometimes because I'm like, every single video, I just feel like I make people feel judged. But I mean, I hope that is not the case because I am the first audience for everything that I say. Like, I need this stuff as much as anyone, probably more than most people. The reason why I can teach it is because I was the student who needed to learn it.
100%. I also think too that at least maybe it's the way I've curated my algorithm, but I feel like there is also this swing, and part of what we're going to touch on today too is I think for some of us when we grew up in a similar time where there was punishments and there was rewards and there was very specific consequences versus natural all of that sort of stuff.
Right.
I feel like when I first entered parenting, and then social media kind of was exploding at the same time with parenting influencers, it almost was too much at first, right? It was scripts, and it was it got to the point that I felt like I couldn't even do what felt natural in the moment because I was but what if I say the wrong thing? And what if they're in therapy for 30 years later and I traumatize them? And it almost got to the point that it paralyzed me. But then finding accounts like yours where it's there's the middle ground, right? You don't have to be perfect every single time. You don't have to have the script every single time. You can still lean into your natural parenting instincts while also maybe changing things from how you grew up or breaking that cycle or, reflecting on the way you handled that and coming back for an apology, So it's been interesting to see, how old are your kids? Did you feel that pendulum?
I did a little bit. I mean, I'm a researcher by nature. So when I have a problem, I'm that person who gets hyperfixated and I go down the rabbit holes. Just to give you an example of this, when I was 24, my wife was pregnant. I worked for Sears. Sears is now out of business, but Sears, Roebuck and Co. I was going into the office. And at church, I started to get into, I've been doing this religion thing my whole life. My parents raised me in a religious framework. And I started finding incongruence with kind of how I was raised and what I believed and what I was hearing. And so most people kind of fix that incongruence by like listening to a podcast episode or like finding a good influencer out there who can tell me about how I'm misunderstanding the historical context of my religion or the Bible or spirituality or something. I went to seminary. That's how I solved that problem, was I got a master's degree in the Bible, right? So the way in which I solve problems is by becoming the expert. And so I had a kid who was like, I didn't know what to do with him. And at the same time, I had also become a licensed foster parent. So I have this toddler who's very challenging, highly sensitive, just a ton of behavioral stuff, really good kid, really brilliant kid. But I didn't know what to do. And everything that I reached for in my parenting toolkit was just punishments, screaming, rewards. That was it. That's all I had. And it became very clear, even just through the practical foster care training, that like, oh, that stuff is not ideal. That stuff does not work well. And so I kind of went down that same path. I didn't immediately go back and get my PhD in developmental psychology. I'm doing that now. But I basically was like, I know how to study. I have access because of my university to all of these academic resources. I can just learn this stuff. And so I didn't actually experience it as like going on and going to the social media and going, oh, where is the advice? Like I actually got all the advice from the academic world, from developmental psychologists who were writing books. And then I showed up on social media one day and I was like, oh, look, there's lots of people who talk about this here. It was like arriving at a party where everybody likes the same stuff.
But is everybody like speaking the same language though? Or is there kind of translations off of like somebody speaking with a little bit of an accent of how they translated it?
Yeah, what was funny was that it was actually very similar to my experience of the Bible, which was a lot of people talked with a lot of authority about things they had no real idea about. And they would say things that were kind of like abstractly kind of right. Like they'd be like, well, there's no, when a child is having a meltdown, like their brain doesn't work at all. And I was like, okay, there's like kind of some like granule of truth in that. Like, yeah, like there are parts of their brain that shut down when they're in a meltdown. Obviously, I wrote a book called Punishment-Free Parenting. So like, I'm not out here trying to say like, oh, traditional parenting is the best way. But a lot of the gentle parenting advice, the reason why it feels so impossible to follow is because it's impossible to follow. Like it's not actually grounded in anything. It's just kind of like abstract. I kind of sort of understand this thing, and then I just yapped about it on the internet, and then I got famous. So when I came into it, I was like, oh, I'm not going to say anything until I'm already an expert. And so I like got that expertise. And then one of my early things was I connected with all of these professionals, parenting authors and stuff. And I was like, hey, if I ever say anything wrong, you tell me and I'll pull it down. And so for the first year, I was just making content, and maybe 10% of the time somebody would be like, okay, you're half right about that. And then I would take down the video and make a correction. So by the time I actually wrote Punishment-Free Parenting, I knew what I was talking about. And I gave that book to some of the kind of preeminent voices in child development before it came out. And I was like, not just I want your endorsement, but am I right? Do I need to rewrite this? Like, do I need to throw this book out? And they were like, no. And in fact, you're talking about this in a way that only a person who came to it in this way could talk about it. And so it's kind of nice that you're just like a dad who's talking about this. And I was like, oh, okay. But is everything right though? And they were like, yeah, everything's right. So I was like, okay. Then I can put it out. So I didn't really have the same experience, but I think now I've noticed that the advice on the internet has gotten better than it was 5 years ago. Like 5 years ago, it was a lot of painting with a broad brush and just kind of like whatever. Now it tends to be people are a little bit more grounded in what they're saying. There's still those moments where I'm like, yeah, we're missing half of this, but it's less and less.
Yeah. When I was a first-time parent, my oldest is definitely my more sensitive kid, right? And so the advice that I was seeing that at that point was very one size fits all. It didn't matter if a child was neurodivergent. We were like, oh, this is the approach to all of them. For her, if she is having a moment and I am in any way speaking, we're done. We are shutting down. I just need to be when I was trying so hard to be like, I see you in this, I see you're having a hard time. In hindsight, I'm like, I would have screamed at me. I would have been like, leave me alone. I get overstimulated too. And so I feel like we have come a long way in terms of at least admitting that one size is not the answer. But I think that was definitely a complicating factor for me too, and just navigating all of it, like, trying to figure all of it out and knowing how I wanted to approach it, but it not going the way that it looked like it should have been going, or it was going for everyone else,
I tend to ascribe a little bit more to the one size, like there is a right way to do these things. My thing is, but you're never going to do it. But having a challenging kid forced me to be a great parent. Most of the parenting advice from old school, 90s parenting, it works on kids who have enough independent play and they aren't neurodivergent and they aren't highly sensitive and they're not being overwhelmed by a world of, AI and social media and everything else. The new world that we're a part of requires excellent parenting. And so what's funny to me is a lot of the advice that's given online, it's grounded in what works for their kid, but their kid is not all kids. Mm-hmm. And what's interesting is that when you actually get into the research, you find out that the hardest kid to parent, which is like the neurodivergent, highly sensitive, explosive, ODD, take all the acronyms and put it in one kid, right? That kid would just require excellent parenting. And if you gave that same parenting to all of the other kids, they would thrive. The problem is most of us rely on strategies that only work on kids who don't require excellent parenting. And I have one of those. I have one who I can just kind of phone it in and not really be present and not really do all of the emotional regulation and not really do all the, and he's just like, okay, but I'm still regulated. He can be hungry and not melt down over everything all the time. And I'm like, oh, this is so weird. If you had been my first kid, I would have thought my next kid was broken. Instead, I had a tricky one first. And then by the time he came along, I was like, oh man, you are way more tolerant of bad parenting.
But do you ever feel like, and this is just a genuine question because my husband and I were just talking about this the other day. Do you ever feel with your one that felt a little easier, that expectation is almost unfair? With mine, that it feels a little easier, more go with the flow. If I say please go do XYZ, it's done. She's that. How can I help? And not to say that the oldest is not like that now, but like that it has taken time. But like what I find is that our expectation of the more chill one, when she happens to be having a day where she's not herself and she's not happy and she's not feeling great and she's sassing off or just not acting like herself, we tend to be so much more like, you don't act like, what are you doing? Don't act like that. Where her feelings actually are totally valid. And she's allowed to be a kid too. She's allowed to talk back too. She's allowed to test those boundaries. But when she does it, we really have to check ourselves on not being like, you don't do that. And instead being like, oh, I see you in this moment. Okay. Like you're working through it. Did you notice that with your differences too?
Absolutely. So it's interesting because the next book I'm writing is about siblings because of that exact dynamic. Because I don't think we have enough books about siblings. I think so often we think if I write a book about parenting one kid or like your kid, then it can be applied to each individual kid. But what we don't see is the intersectionality of, oh, actually you're not the same parent to each kid. And there are places where you just hold your kid to that higher expectation. This is the plug for the way that I teach to parent. I didn't come up with this stuff. I literally am just applying things that other people have said. That's all it is. Most of the smartest people in the world about parenting are terrible at talking to parents. In the same way that most of the people who are really, really smart about ancient texts of the Bible or the Quran or whatever do not have social skills. Because if they did, they wouldn't be doing what they do, right? Like they are gifted in a different way. So none of the stuff that I'm saying is new. It's all just recycled. And I try and my absolute best to give credit where credit is due whenever possible. I don't try and take credit for any of it. But the stuff that I'm talking about, like my 9-year-old is so easy now. He was the really, really hard kid. And so you asked earlier, how old are my kids? My kids are 9, almost 6, 4, and 18 months.
Okay.
And when I think about my 9-year-old, I'm like, man, this kid at 3, this kid at 4, this kid at 5, what was I even going to do? And so I find that my highest expectations are actually for him now, because I used to have no expectations for him. But now that he's grown so much, even though he was my tricky one, he's not anymore. And so I find myself going into the birth order problems more than like the roles problems, where I'm like, come on, dude, you're way smarter than this action that you just did. Like, you're way smarter than what you're doing right now. And that's not fair, because he's also impulsive and a 9-year-old little boy who does crazy stuff. So
yeah, the birth order thing is a whole other conversation in and of itself that truly fascinates me. And even with my oldest, who is definitely my more sensitive kid, there are so many times where I catch myself being like, you know better, or you're older, but you're still only 8. So no, you probably don't know better, or you might have had a momentary lapse in judgment even if you did know better.
I get in trouble with my wife when I say this. This is one place where we disagree sometimes, which is actually kind of rare, because most of the time me and my wife are completely on the same page with parenting. Not always, but usually when we're not on the same page, one of us knows that we're wrong. One of the examples is chores. I'm like, kids should do chores because it's healthy developmentally, and there's all of this research into why chores are really good for kids. And it's not about like, I'm lazy and I don't want to clean up. No, it's literally harder to do with a kid, but it's important for them. And my wife is like, I know that's true. And also, I'm not doing that.
Listen, I'm with her. I get it. Like, yes, I know it's important, but when I have the dishes in the sink and it needs to get unloaded,
100%.
and we have homework and dinner needs to get done, I don't want your help right now, even
I
though
don't want your help.
take it.
Exactly. Like, I know how important this is for your development, and also go on the couch. Right.
Exactly.
So, they're usually, when we disagree, one of us knows that we're right. And she's usually the right one. I just picked the one singular example where I'm right, of course, because I'm the...
Well, that all the other moms understand, because we're all there. We all get it.
You got it. That's why I picked that one. Not because it makes me look good.
Exactly.
But one of the ways in which we disagree, and sometimes, and actually we don't know kind of who's right, is where I go, look, there's no way to actually treat your oldest like you treat your other kids. No parent have I ever met can do that effectively.
Yeah.
And she's like, that doesn't mean we shouldn't try. I think if you try, you wind up making the kid feel like, am I being treated differently here, but everybody's pretending I'm not? So instead, what I do is I go, with great power comes great responsibility, vice versa, right? If I'm going to hold you to this high standard, then I'm also going to, like, if you ask me to use your tablet, and your 6-year-old little brother was like, I want to use my mama, I want to do this. My 4-year-old little brother is like, mama, I want to do this. I'd be like, no, it's not time for that. I'm making that call for you. If he asks me, I'm like, don't make my life hard. Don't do this in front of them, but you go do you. And it's like, whoa, wait, so you give him all these like privileges? I'm like, no, literally I have to, because it would be so unfair if I didn't give him privileges when I expect so much of him. So that's how I counteract that. And my wife is like, no, you should just treat him more fairly. And I'm like, I don't think it's possible. With the birth order thing, I don't know if I can ever break myself of that. I'm only as old as a parent as you. And so that's another thing that I say to him all the time is I go, yeah, man, I only have 9 years of parenting experience, and you've been here for all of it.
Yeah.
So when you're so much better at regulating my little brother than me, I'm like, you're right, because you helped me learn that.
Yeah.
And I can't lie to him. Like, he's right. I don't know how to regulate a 9-year-old from experience. I know how to do it from the research, but I don't know how to do it from experience until I learn it with him. And so I literally say to him all the time, like, okay, how am I doing? And I've thought about bringing him on my podcast and sitting him down and being like, okay, time to tell the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
How am I failing? And you just let him kind of go nuts and say it. But the thing is, he's so kind that he would just be like, you just do your best, Dad.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, ugh, you're the worst.
It's so true, though, because even, there was like trend a little bit ago that was like, realizing that, yes, I'm a mom and I'm a wife, but I'm also just a 37-year-old woman living life for the first time too, and figuring this all out. And I never really thought about that in the context of Audrey. But yeah, like the parent that I am to her, I had no idea what I was doing. Like, thinking of yourself as a first-time parent to second or third or whatever, the things you learn, the things I cared about, that by my
That's right.
third, I was like, I'm not worried about that. I got bigger fish to fry, But yeah, I definitely can see that. And my husband and I, we had a moment with our oldest in the way that we handle her. She was having trouble. I knew she was working the angle of not wanting to go to school for whatever reason. She wasn't feeling well, but nothing specific wasn't feeling well. And my husband just happened to be home from work today because he's working overnight tonight. So normally I'm handling the school drama with her, which comes up every once in a while. I manage it with her. And there are times where she ends up staying home, but because he was here, it was a line in the sand, not happening.
Right.
And she was escalating and he was escalating right alongside her, as they love to do together. And there are so many times with them that I find myself trying to just diffuse and mediate because they really butt heads, There's all of these complicating factors to parenting, obviously. Even the fact that my oldest two are girls and my third was a boy, and now he's my boy, he's my baby boy, but I can't help but kind of treat him different, even though I really don't want to, So anyway.
The truth is, the hardest part of parenting for most men, not to call it your husband, but
please.
the hardest part of parenting for most men is regulating their own emotions. Women have had to regulate their own emotions in order to survive. There's not the same leniency given to women as men. And so they find themselves far more, for lack of a better term, experienced, practiced at kind of decentering themselves and just doing what's best for someone else. And that's a horrible reality that we live in that society. And it's so funny because, all you hear from the manosphere is women are so emotional. Women are so emotional. It's they're not out here with podcast mics screaming about the male loneliness epidemic, right? We're pretty emotional, but we have not been taught how to regulate our emotions. Yeah. And so a kid comes along and they press on all of these deep-seated triggers. And as one of my good friends, he's a psychologist, he says he didn't come up with it, but he says there's no time in the mind. Time is a construct for our prefrontal cortex. This is why young kids have no sense of time whatsoever. You tell it's going to be 5 minutes. They react like it's going to be an eternity. Time is very weird with brains. And one of the ways in which it's weird is that we know that our limbic system, the part of our brain that's responsible both for memory and emotion and encoding that memory, does not experience time at all. None. Which means that when our kid does something that we did when we were a kid, we are just as likely to act in the way in which our parents acted as anything else. When I said, I don't want to go to school today, that was met with hostility. That was met with, you don't get to make that choice. My dad used to literally say to me, I feel sick every day when I wake up in the morning. Just go to school. I mean, what? For 10 years, I thought just so grown-ups just felt sick when they woke up in the morning every day. And you know, but you hear all these internal messages. So then your kid says, I don't want to go to school today. And you're actually not even reacting to that kid. There's literal neuroscience to back this up. Yeah. The memory centers of your brain fire and you start unconsciously reacting to that. And so you're not actually thinking, what's the best way to handle this situation? You're thinking, this is a threat.
Yeah.
The last time this happened was in 1997. But to your brain, it was yesterday. To your limbic system, it was just now. And you find yourself getting flooded because that's how it was encoded in you. Yeah. And so men are not practiced at this. And it's not their fault per se, but those are the moments when my wife doesn't de-escalate me. She literally just sends me off. She's just like, all right, red card, you're gone.
That's what I have to do too. Yeah. Right? I'm like, you're out, you're done. You're not part of this conversation anymore. Get other room.
And it's not disrespect. And then that feels disrespectful. Yeah. You're banning me?
Yeah.
And then you feel, punished for having emotions. I'm not allowed to have emotions, right? So a lot of this is just layers of humans doing human stuff. And then we don't know how to react in the moment.
Yeah.
And so this is why one of my fundamental things that I teach parents is when you feel the heat, you take a beat. Every time. Your brain can only get escalated for 40 seconds without you reinforcing that loop. So if you can just pause when your kid says something that just drives you up the wall, or your partner or whatever, if you can just pause for 40 seconds, 95% of the time, you're going to come back to that in a completely different mindset. And I think most of us just don't take that break. We don't take that moment. And again, part of that's because we've been taught these parenting myths like, if you don't respond and react in the moment, they're never going to learn their lesson. Instead of saying, oh, actually, most good learning happens after the fact anyway.
Yeah.
You know, my whole children's book is about de-escalating.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it comes from a place of realizing that I needed these tools because in these moments, I go.
Yeah.
I did a workshop early on in the membership,
Yeah.
which is the parent lab, where I was like, okay, so how do you get your partner on board? Because so often this is parents' struggles. And it's not always the wife who's like trying to do the gentle parenting and then the husband who is, but most often it is that dynamic where it's like, how do I get this person on board? And it starts by deconstructing some of those fundamental parenting myths.
Hey friends, Casey here. If you've ever listened to an episode and thought, I wish she'd go even deeper, or I wonder what she really thinks about that, I am so excited to share More Than Milestones Unfiltered, where I do exactly that. More Than Milestones Unfiltered is my private Substack community where I share 2 exclusive podcast episodes every single month. 2 episodes that will never make it to Instagram or the public feed. These are the even more raw, unfiltered stories, harder conversations, and the that's a story for another day moments I usually hold back on. If you want to join me there, just head to the show notes or my link in bio and subscribe. I'd love to see you inside. Well, I would love for us to talk about consequences,
Yes,
punishment-free parenting.
yes.
We've talked about the emotional regulation piece a little bit, but punishment versus consequences versus natural consequences. Can you break down when you're saying punishment-based parenting or punishment-free parenting, what do you mean by that?
It's a great question. So I define punishment pretty narrowly. And like, I don't define it so narrowly that none of us are punishing our kids. I define punishment, and, you know, I don't want to sound cliche here, but how we define punishment is it's a retributive action taken in order to incentivize good behavior or disincentivize bad behavior. So the key word here is retributive. And so any action that we take that is in retribution is a punishment. If our goal is to make somebody feel bad for doing something or make them sorry that they did something, then we are engaging in punishment. And basically all punishments rely on pain. And what's really interesting is that many parents are like, I would never cause my kid pain. And it's like, yeah, but until you understand how pain is processed in the brain, you don't know when you're causing your kid pain. So let me give you an example. If you hit your kid, you know that you're causing them pain because the anterior cingulate cortex in their brain lights up, their pain sensor. But if you tell your child, I don't even want to talk to you right now, I'm so frustrated, go sit in the corner. The anterior cingulate cortex lights up. They experience that as pain. When a child is told that they're grounded and they can't go to their friend's birthday party or something like that, that they wanted to go to, that child experiences that as pain. When you take away a treasured object from a child, that child experiences that as pain when it's done in a retributive way. Because kids can naturally sense when it's retributive. Kids are not always the brightest. However, there are some ways in which your kid is brilliantly smart, basically from 6 months on. And one of those ways is being attuned to their caregiver's emotions and specifically to their caregiver's sense of how they're feeling about them. And this is very fundamentally evolutionary behaviors, right? They know that their primary saving grace on this planet is that you are taking care of them. You're feeding them, you're housing them, you're making sure that they have what they need. And so when you take retributive action, when you enact retribution on your kid, they feel that very deeply. And what it does is it just sends them into their fight or flight response, which then shuts down the part of their brain that can think morally or that practices impulse control or executive functioning or any of the things that you're really looking for them to do, right? The reason that we punish our kids is usually because their prefrontal cortex is not working the way in which we hope it it was working, right? They do something that was impulsive and we go, that wasn't good. Or they punched their brother in the face because they weren't thinking about the long-term implications of that.
Yeah.
Or they weren't thinking about how somebody else would feel if they got punched in the face. And so we're mad at them because their prefrontal cortex didn't work well. Again, 90% of the time, 95% of the time. And so we try, instead of teaching them in a way that grows their brain and teaches them, we actually send them further into their dysregulation, which may stop the behavior in the moment. It may cause them to stop doing what we don't like.
Yeah.
But why they stop doing it is almost never encoded correctly. There's so many surveys, you can look them up, of kids being interviewed about why they were, and we're going to use physical corporal punishment here, but why they were spanked, right? And the kid will be like, I was spanked because my mom doesn't like the color green. And you're like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense. But in their 4-year-old brain, they colored on the wall with a green marker. And now my mom didn't like that it was green was the message that they took away because their brain was just grasping at that moment. Instead of responding with a consequence of, we need to clean this off the wall, or we need to, we can only use markers at the table now because we've lost our privileges of using them here because this is what happened. All of those are not retributive. They're trying to prevent future harm. And so those are consequences. And in the book, I talk about, I have an entire chapter on consequences early in my book for adults, Punishment-Free Parenting, where I talk about the difference, exactly as you put, between logical consequences and natural consequences. Natural consequences are just most of the time that your kid does something that you don't want them to do, there's a consequence for that action that you don't have to really, your only job in that moment is to direct their attention to that. So a great example is your kid's playing in the sandbox with another kid and they take the truck away and that kid gets mad and tries to take the truck back, and then they push and they shove, and then that kid doesn't want to play with them anymore. A lot of parents are like, I need to add a consequence so that they learn to share. When in reality, you have to just sit them down for 2 minutes, hopefully after a couple of minutes, and go, hey, you were having a lot of fun playing with that kid. And now you're not playing with them anymore. Why? Oh, because the truck, right? Oh, so when you took the truck from them, they didn't like it and they stopped playing. Natural consequence. The problem is, not everything has a natural consequence. If it has a natural consequence, let the natural consequence ride. It's one of the greatest teachers. The mistakes and repair, one of the best teachers that we have in parenting.
Yeah.
Occasionally, the natural consequence is not sufficient because it's not a consequence to the child. So, great example of this is a kid decides to make pancakes in the kitchen, and they get out the flour, and the flour goes everywhere all over the kitchen, except for in the bowl that they're trying to put it in. And then I go, when you try to make pancakes alone, the natural consequence is you make a big mess. And they're like, great, let's leave it.
Yeah.
So now all of a sudden you have a situation where like they're perfectly content to have that consequence be the consequence, the cause and effect. So now you got to go, okay, well, what is the logical consequence here? Because I don't want to be retributive. I don't want to say, go sit in the corner. I hate you. You're dumb. No tablet for the next week. All of that stuff is just going to cause them to say, like, I don't understand. My mom doesn't like baking or whatever, right? They're not going to really internalize that well. Instead, you have to find a consequence that is, and this is the exact acronym that I use in the book, it's WRAP, W-R-A-P. Is the consequence warranted? In other words, does the natural consequence take care of itself? If the answer is no, then you use a logical consequence. Are you in a reasonable state of mind? No consequence that you give while escalated is a consequence. If you give the consequence while you're losing your mind or while you're flooded, it's always going to feel retributive to your child. So it automatically becomes a punishment. So number one, is it warranted? Are you reasonable? Is your kid reasonable? That's the other piece, right? If your kid's screaming and melting down, they're not reasonable. They're not going to receive any positive. Is the consequence A, associated? So is it a direct cause and effect with what they did, right? It's if cleaning up the flour on the floor is an associated consequence to making flour mess on the floor. And is it proportional? If you say to your kid, you have to clean the kitchen for the next month every day by yourself, that's not proportional. If it's, okay, you just have to pick up 1 spoonful of flour and then I'll do the rest for you, that's also not proportional. So it has to be proportional, because a consequence that's not strong enough, the kid goes, well, this is not really a problem. I can just do this whenever I want. It only takes me 10 seconds to clean it up. I don't care, even if it takes my mom 10 minutes. Or if it's too extreme, then the kid, again, receives that as a punishment. They're being so ridiculous about this. What do you mean I'm grounded for 6 months? And parents do that stuff all the time. So that's how you know, right? So you start with saying, I don't want to be retributive, which means that I need to do this in an effective way. And then you can go down that, does the consequence take care of itself? If the answer is no, then is it warranted? Yes. Am I reasonable? Hopefully. If not, wait. Are they reasonable? Hopefully. If not, wait. Is it associated and is it proportional? So this is the kind of advice that I give, but it's so grounded because you have to understand how kids' brains work to understand why. A disassociated consequence, they just miss the internalization. So this is why a kid who's hit for every problem, they actually do internalize the association of what that means. What that means is when I have a problem, I can hit to solve it. That's the associated response to that.
Yeah.
This is kind of where things go down that path.
Yeah.
And,
But now, even back to the RAP acronym.
Yeah.
I love that so much. But that in and of itself takes quite a bit of regulation on a parent's part, right? In order to even take yourself out of it in the moment and be like, okay, I am not calm enough to handle this right now. I need a minute.
Right.
And I'm going to come back. And in terms of emotional regulation for parents and for children, obviously your book is all about that for children, but definitely more than likely beneficial for the parent that is also reading it to them, and just that slowing down, that reminder. What is the root of regulation for a parent who really struggles and is like, that sounds incredible, I want to be able to do that. How can I start to regulate myself as the parent and approach consequences that way?
If I have to give the 3-minute response, it's most parents, and I kind of alluded to this earlier with how women have been forced to regulate their emotions because of society. But even for most moms, they don't always know that they're doing that. The problem that I find with most parents, I do this workshop once in a while called How to Stop Yelling at Your Kids, where this is exactly what we're talking about, just how to regulate in those moments. What I find is that most parents believe that they go 0 to 60. They go, I didn't feel dysregulated, and then now all of a sudden I do. And what really is happening is that they're climbing a mountain, and they taught themselves, because their emotions were so overwhelming to their parents. Basically, I have an entire chapter of punishment-free parenting called Emotions Are Your Superpowers, where it talks about why adults were taught historically. It's the only part of the book where I talk about history. But historically, why adults were taught not to feel any of their feelings. And what happens when you teach somebody to not feel any of their feelings is that they're able to adequately repress and bottle up their feelings until they're not. And so basically we are creating these pressure chambers for parents where there's no relief valve. They don't even know that they're getting escalated. They don't even know that their heart rate's going up. They don't even know that they're being flooded by sympathetic nervous hormones like adrenaline and cortisol. But they are. And then by the time they get to that point, they've flown off the edge. So that's why I say, when you feel the heat, you have to take a beat. Actually, in those moments, you've already climbed that mountain at that point. And really, you're in survival mode of just don't make this worse. And 99% of the time that you raise your voice and start yelling, even if you get the compliance behavior that you're looking for in that moment, you've made the situation worse because you've removed the opportunity to actually teach that child to regulate their feelings in a way that they're going to be able to do without you screaming at them.
Yeah.
And you've taught them that they should wait for you to scream. Like, there's so many things going on. But really, in a nutshell, it's that most of us don't know how to feel our feelings in an effective way. And we've gotten to this point in society, if the pendulum has swung too far, it's that we think like, oh, our feelings are so important that I should just go into my feelings and just go into depressive episodes for weeks at a time because I'm feeling my feelings finally. No, feeling your feelings means allowing the feeling to come and allowing the feeling to go. And you need strategies for that. I think this is the prevalence of talk therapy. I have some issues with the prevalence of talk therapy, namely in that many people treat therapists as if I'm supposed to have a bi-weekly therapy appointment for the rest of my life. And even if I'm seeing no improvement, I'm like, no, either your therapist is helping you navigate things, either they're working themselves out of a job or they're not working themselves out of a job. And if they're not working themselves out of a job, find a new therapist, right? Like, I'm not saying that there won't be a decade here of work to be done, but if you're not seeing improvements, if your life's getting worse and not better, you probably should pause and figure out whether or not this is effective. But I think most of us need to get those tools to work through our emotions. And really, this is a hard truth. Neuroplasticity says we all can change. We all can grow. We all can learn secure attachment. We all can learn to regulate our emotions. We all can learn these tools. However, there is probably a much harder road for us because we're trying to do it at 37 or 35 or even 25. After our brain is much more firmly established than had we learned these tools at 7. And so most parents don't want to hear me say what I'm about to say, but it's the reason why I wrote Set My Feelings Free with my wife was because I am going to keep teaching parents how to regulate their emotions, but I hope that my kids won't have to do that work. I hope that my kids will not have to learn how to do this at 37.
Yeah.
So for the parent who goes, well, I just want to learn how, like, it would be so much better, Jon, if I didn't just punish my kids and scream at them all the time or take things away from them or just fold, right? The permissive parents among us who like, we don't know what to do. So we just cave and we just give our kid the 5th popsicle or whatever. I wish I wasn't like that. And I'm like, yeah, so let's do work. And most of my work in the parent lab, I'm working with parents through that stuff, but it's slow work.
Yeah.
And it takes years to rewire your brain to be non-reactive. That said, you can do this with a 7-year-old. It doesn't take years. It takes a couple of months, and you teach them how to regulate their emotions. And then as they grow, they learn how to apply those same tools in new ways. And then they're not doing this work. So if you're like, man, I wish I didn't have to climb this mountain, my response to that is, I know. And that I don't want your kid to. That's actually why I wrote the book. That's why I wrote Set My Feelings Free, because I don't want your kid to have to redo this. I know how hard it is to do what we're talking about. I still screw up, at least as often as I don't. I wrote a book with the subtitle, How to Raise Kids Without Raising Your Voice, and I still yell at my kids at least once a week.
Yeah.
It used to be once a day or once an hour, but it's less. But I'm not fixed. I'm probably still going to yell at my kids every once in a while for the rest of my life. But my goal is for my kids to not be that way, for them to have better tools, to know when they're climbing the mountain and to be able to get off that lift before it gets too late.
And I think ultimately for all of us that are in any way trying to break cycles or gentle parent or, set our kids up for a different experience than we've had as adults in that ability to regulate, like that's what we want. We want the tools. And I know for me, at least, like I'm a big fan of lay it out for me, make it as easy as possible. So let's talk about your book. Let's talk about it. It's the perfect time. Tell us about it.
Yeah. So basically, after I wrote Punishment Free Parenting, after I wrote the first draft, it didn't have any real practical tools. It was mostly just like, this is why you shouldn't punish your kids. And this is why you should hold boundaries. And this is why it's good to feel your feelings. And this is the history behind that. And all of that was important. And most of that got kept in the book in some form or fashion. But at the very end, I wrote these 6 chapters, the last 6 chapters of the book. One of them is how to repair with your kids when you screw up. That was really essential. And then I wrote these 5 short chapters that were what to do every time your kid's having these big emotions. What is specifically, step by step. And I call it the step-by-step, 5-step whole parent method at the back of the book. And the response was, Jon, this 5-step method. Are you kidding me? This is the best part of this book. Like, I love the book. I vibed it, but man, like, tell people to read this part first. And I was like, yeah, but I put it at the back so that you'd have all the context. And they're like, I don't need context. I need these steps. So now I tell people all the time, if you're only going to read one part of the book, read the last 5 chapters.
Yeah.
But the problem was all of these tools were focused around parents, because my parenting paradigm is usually, you can work with the adult brain, and hopefully the adult learns to parent more effectively, and then the kid will come along. Like, it's almost never the kid's problem. It's always the adult's problem. Problem being, kids still have underdeveloped brains. And so there is only so much, as you mentioned at the beginning, of like talking about your feelings that's going to help a kid move through. Most regulation strategies we know from OT, and it's a multidisciplinary approach. So from OT, from psychologists who specialize in ADHD and ODD and PDA and autism and AS, like just all of that, right? Like from behavioral researchers, from BCBAs, all of these people say, no, actually there are these tools, these neurological, like neuroanatomical behavior tools. My sister-in-law is a PhD behavioral neuroscientist. There's like only like a couple dozen of those in the world. Wow. So this is like a totally different discipline, right? Yeah. This isn't psychology. This is like behavioral neuroscience. And there was very, very few tools out there. Occasionally there's a Instagram video that goes viral. It's like, tell your kid to smell the flowers and blow out the candles. But why? Not really explained. And also there's no tool for a kid. That's still the parent talking to the kid. That's not the kid knowing to do that in the moment. So we had this idea. What if we took a famous song that kids, like a nursery rhyme that kids know, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, and we rewrote the words so that kids could sing this song of how to like do these emotional regulation games. My wife's this brilliant artist, and I'm like, what, you want to illustrate this? Like, let's just do this. And so we pitched it. We got picked up by an amazing publisher, Beaming Books, who does these amazing, like beautiful children's books. And we rewrote all the lyrics to Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star to be these emotional regulation games. And the idea is each one of the games walks a kid through, like, I think 5 different kids in the book. It's a diverse cast, boys, girls, different cultures, different races, different abilities. And each of these kids has a common experience that kids go through. Like, somebody doesn't share the truck in the sandbox. A little sibling knocks down the tower that they're using, or they're scared. One of the kids, it's actually my son in the book, is scared in his bed at night. And we were like, okay, these are things that most kids experience. And we name the feeling that they're having. And then we give them a practical tool. So the picture shows them the situation, so that they can code that in their memory. And then we name the feeling, and then we tell them exactly what to do. Here's the visual cue. Here's the story. Remember, here's what we do. Here's the song that goes with it, because we know that songs can be accessed by the brain when it's melting down in ways that spoken words can't be. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Another thing that I learned from counseling adults, actually, was I had all these dementia patients, and if I could sing to them, they could totally understand and be totally lucid. Yep. And then if I talked to them, they couldn't be. So I was like, oh, I wonder if you could do that with a kid too. Sing to a kid, they're actually totally able to understand what you're saying. So we made the book singable. We gave them these tools, and we go one by one. One of them is the color game, where this girl who's disappointed that she can't go outside and play in the pool because it's pouring rain, lightning and thunder, she goes around her house searching for different colors. And we know that this is an integrating tool from cognitive behavioral therapy. It's a grounding technique. It brings the sensory perception back online, where when you're looking for these colors and you're naming them as you go, the brain regulates itself. This is a tool that I've used with literally tens of thousands of parents. And so there's that one. There's one about imagination, using imagination to overcome fear. We know, again, from the science, that when you activate imagination, you can actually override your fear sensing, because fear in kids comes from the same place as imagination. They're imagining the fears, so we can imagine something in that stead and fix that. So literally every single one of them is these neuroanatomical tools that you can go, but it's written as a song and it's illustrated beautifully so that you're not just pulling out this book because their kid's having a meltdown. Actually, what I want parents to do is read it to their kid every night before bed. Right before bed, your kid's limbic system is firing. Their memory systems are online. They're going to encode the information in the book into their working memory. They're going to organize that information. The second that they fall asleep, their hippocampus is going to organize the information. And then during the day when they're having the meltdown, you start the song, right? But hurting others, I resist. This is one of the lines in the book. I say this to my almost 6-year-old, and he will grab his fists and pull them to his chest. And he knows, because it's been encoded into his memory, that this is how, when I'm angry, I can stop before my anger makes me pop. We have the words, they're locked in. And so the idea is this book becomes this tool. And it already received this stellar recommendation and review from the School Library Journal, where School Library Journal was like, this should be in every school library because these kids need to learn these tools, because these are how the teachers are going to be able to manage classroom behaviors.
Yeah.
And these are, again, neuroscientific tools. I didn't make them up. These come from cognitive behavioral therapy. They come from behavioral neuroscience. And what I was blown away by was, we have lots of books to help kids name their feelings. We have lots of books that affirm that kids have feelings. But it has not been, at least in my experience, it has not been since Fred Rogers of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood that we actually have somebody who's teaching their kids to manage those feelings. That we just say, oh, your feelings are valid, your feelings are valid, your feelings are valid. But when they get trapped in a cyclone of their emotions and they can't get out of them, we can say they're valid until we're blue in the face. The kid is trapped. And so I looked at that. I looked at Mr. Rogers. A lot of people don't know this. Mr. Rogers and his show, the reason that he did that was because the 3 greatest behavioral psychologists in the world at the time had just started a lab for understanding kids' behavior in Pittsburgh. And that was where the show was recorded. And he found out about that at the University of Pittsburgh. And every single script for Mr. Rogers was approved by the 3 leading behavioral psychologists in the world.
Wow.
And so the reason why we have all these tools, and the reason why I'm so attached to that, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to do what he did, is because literally the reason why that show was so magical, in many ways, the reason that a generation of kids can navigate their own feelings in ways that their parents never could, is because of those tools. And so we've just done that. We've updated it. Like I said, my wife illustrated it. It will totally change your kid's experience of tantrums forever.
It sounds like it. That's amazing. And again, having it all in a bite-sized spot that fits into your life, that you can build into your routine, build into their brain is just incredible. So where can people get it?
So it is available on April 28th. You can go on to bookshop.org if you want to support your local bookstore, or you can also find it on the big ones, Amazon, Barnes & Noble. It is available allegedly wherever books are sold. And I just encourage you to get a copy and tell your kid's school library to get a copy. School Library Journal had a great write-up for it. Tell your public library to get a copy, because not just because I want to sell lots of books. Of course, I don't get very much money for these books. The reason why we did this is because we desperately need these tools out in the world much more than anything else. And if you want your kid to not have to have the same struggles that you did, which, by the way, basically every parent I know says that. I want my kids to have better than I had. Get them the book, read them the book every night. Your kid's going to become obsessed with it, especially if you sing it, and they're going to be able to manage their emotions during the day a heck of a lot better.
I love it. It's amazing. And we will link to all of those options in the episode notes for you guys too. And then tell everyone where they can find you as well, like website, Instagram, social media, if they just want more of your content as well.
More of the content. Yeah. So I also wrote another book. It's called Punishment-Free Parenting. That's for grownups. Your kid's not going to ask you to read that one at bedtime, but you can find that book wherever books are sold. And also at Whole Parent. That's WHOLEPARENT on YouTube and on TikTok and on Substack and on Instagram and on Facebook. basically all of the different places. I have a podcast called the Whole Parent Podcast that you can find there as well. If you're interested in the Parent Lab, wholeparentacademy.com. That is where you can find information about the Parent Lab, which is my online community where people can get coaching from me and a course library of 20 plus courses, just kind of how to parent more effectively.
Love it. Oh my gosh. Well, this was amazing and so insightful. And I'm so excited for your book to be out in the world. I actually might grab a copy for my office because I have little ones coming and there's big feelings sometimes at physical therapy. So thank you
Absolutely.
so much. Thank you so much for being here. And we'll get all of this linked in the episode notes. And yeah, we will see you guys next time on another episode of More Than Milestones.
Thanks, Casey.